Hi, this is Kendra from Pencil and Pigment, and today I wanted to talk about some tips that I use that I find helpful for shading when I am illustrating and creating. So right here I have drawn out a value range, and what I have done is just slowly press harder and harder and harder on the pencil. Now I am using cold press watercolor paper. By no means is this what you should illustrate on. I mean, once you know the rules, you can break them all, but this is what I'm creating on today. That way, if I want to do a little watercolor demo with this, I have that option left open. The second one I did is the Faber-Castell colored pencil. This is a color they called mauve. I think it's a beautiful violet. But this is a value range. You can also purchase like a value range chart. I will link one that Amazon sells. This is one I printed. But know that when I'm talking about different values, I am talking about from light to dark. And the larger your value range, the more realistic something becomes. Now, there are different ways to create shadow. You can hatch, which is drawing lines just in one direction. You can cross hatch, is where you draw lines and then opposing lines. You can stipple, which looks like little tiny polka dots. Or you can blend out, which is just sort of lightly, lighter, 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 from dark to lightest when you are drawing and when you are creating, okay? And this is just, these are different styles you can play around with and experiment with and see which one you like, you prefer. You can even draw the same thing twice and see the difference in those styles if there's one you want to adopt or spend more time with. Now you can press harder to get a darker value, or you can put your lines closer together. And that's the same here. You can press harder, put your lines closer together. Dots, you can press harder or put them closer together for darker value. And then blending is just holding your pencil to the paper with pressure and slowly lightening up on that pressure. Now there are items you can use. There's a paper stump. This is a size 1, it's very tiny. And this is a tortillon. And this is also a size 1, and it's very tiny. I will link a video where you can make these if you're doing a no-buy art supply like I am. The tortillons are easier to make because they are a looser wrap of paper. But you can also just, if I am drawing the same value across the page, you can blend out with these and get a lighter to lighter value, okay? These are another blending idea for shading. Now, when you're looking at shading, there are different transitions you can do. There's sort of a hard edge transition. This is very abrupt, but it denotes a strong angle in a corner. There is a gradual sort of blending out value transition. This is a little bit smoother, and then there's more gradual. And this denotes a very smooth corner or shape, a natural shape. So I'm going to draw out a pair of lips, and we are going to look at how I go about shading and figuring out what I want to do. So these are my lips. Here's my top lip. Here is my bottom lip. Now, if you are getting into portrait drawing and you want to try and figure out all your different light sources, what you can do is you can photograph yourself next to different lights and lamps and overhead things. You can go outside at different hours and look at the different angles. Now what I've drawn here is a little tiny sun, and I can move this around, and this reminds me where my highlight is coming from, where my core light is coming from, where the highlight could be, where the reflective light could be. So I need to make sure I angle my sun where I want it. And then the opposing side will be the shadow, the drop shadow, the cast shadow, okay? So when I'm doing lips, the lips are pressed tightly together. This is where, no light comes in. This is sort of the occlusion shadow. No light comes in between these two lips. They are not open. There are no teeth. If I'm saying my sun is coming, my light is coming from this angle, then what I'm going to have over here is I'm going to have my cast shadow below my lip. You have to think in terms of three-dimensional. Now, books that can be very, very helpful beginning drawing books show the initial shapes, sort of the cube, the sphere, you know, ovoid, whatever you're working on, to show the different sides of that shape and the different types of shadows. I have to look at this sunlight as it's coming down to my lips, okay? So this is going to be the brightest area. This is sort of my core light, and this will be in the core shadow. Core shadow is going to be a little bit darker, not as much as our inclusion or our occlusion shadow. Know that there are different sort of lines on lips, and it's going to get brighter. So if this is the farthest away, it's a little darker. It could also have a little bit of a cast shadow as it gets lighter. There is also reflective light. So I have to look if the light bounces off any other surface, is it going to come back up? And that's where I would have light showing sort of bouncing up and coming into the indent. If the chin sticks out and protrudes, this is the indent, so there would be no light, and this is underneath the lip. So here I am, and I just need to change the value up and make sure that this is sort of blended out to look a little bit more natural. And if I don't include any section for the reflective light, I can sort of back erase that and create a really quick lip. Now, when it comes to watercolor and painting, you have options of what you can do. You can take a color and you can add more water, and the more water you add to that, let's say you're using wells in a palette, the more water you add, the lighter that color becomes. That is an option for you for shading. I am just using a little bit of alizarin crimson. This is a cool red. And I can sort of pull this out and it gets lighter. The other thing I can do is let this dry and add a second coat to the areas I want darker. Okay, if I am doing, can we see this here? Okay, I am doing a loose lip here in watercolor, and I want to include some of the darker values in the middle. I want to include some of the drop shadow here. I can go darker just pulling directly from my pan instead of the well. The well will give me the lighter color, and directly from the pan I can get the darker color. Now, another option you can do, which is, you know, very much the joy of watercolor painting. These are my lips here. Another thing you can do is you can shade with another color. So I can take a little bit of my ultramarine and I can have that be part of the shadow, and I can have my shadow now be purple. It doesn't have to be a darker color. Doesn't have to be a darker color red. It could be purple, and I could have purple shadow lips. There are a little bit more options if you are layering colors, if you are doing things in paints or colored pencils. I would say this is if you are primarily a watercolor artist. You can also highlight with neon. It doesn't have to be sunlight. You can have opera pink or magenta coming in, and that could be your highlight color. That could be the core light colors, or the core dark colors could be a dark green light. Get out your camera phone, start taking selfies in different styles of light. Angle the light, go outside, do it at different times, and figure out where your light is coming from. Is it reflecting back up? How long, is there going to be any sort of shadow situation that drops down now for this face to include in the chin? If this is the chin, of the face, there's going to be shadow here. So pay attention. You can do this with sort of still lifes. You can take an apple, which is really, really close to a sphere, and you can move that around with different lamps, different lights. You can create a little sun. You can practice with hatching and stippling. Stippling takes a lot more time depending on the size of the dot, but it looks really cool. It's kind of like comics when they do little tiny bits of color. Move your light source around and really experiment and get in there and start practicing some of these great techniques, because this is what sort of propels your art into the next stage and the next level of creating, is working on shadows and highlights and understanding that if you're doing these, that it's layers. You're building up layers for shadow, and you can take away and erase sometimes layers. Sometimes you can add white ink if you want a stronger highlight with some of your watercolors. That's an option. But I just wanted to give you a couple tips to get you started. I hope this helps. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.